Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Dean and Chapter, a very warm welcome to Norwich Cathedral and to the Western Room for this symposium as we commemorate the 110th anniversary of Edith Cavell's death. It is a packed programme this afternoon, and so I realise other people may be coming in later, but we'll need to make a start because some of our speakers are needing to get away. So just a few notices about this space. So if there is an emergency, please exit the building the way you came in and gather on the green outside the door. We're not anticipating any practice or practice alarm, so, but I'm sure it won't be necessary. If you're in need of a toilet, they are through the door to your right and then to the left. And there are some books available on the back table. Terry Arthur has made some of her books available, and also Nick Miller's Grove pamphlet about Edith Cavell are also all available on the back table for a donation. And the donation is in support of the Edith Cavell Grant Fund. So please do visit the table and be aware of that. Also available in the cathedral shop is the book about the Edith Cavell paintings by Brian Whelan in the cathedral. If you're interested in those, that is available in the cathedral shop downstairs. It is a packed programme, but I will try to work in a space for a bit of a comfort break in the middle. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the first of our speakers, Professor Nancy Fontaine, formerly the Chief Nurse at the Norwich and Norfolk University Hospital, and now Chair of Trustees for the Cavell Nurses Trust. Nancy, thank you for being with us.
Well, what a prestigious honour to be with so many Cavell devotees and amongst Cavell experts. And thank you very much for that kind introduction. So I am the chair of the Cavell charity. And is there anyone in the room that doesn't know about the charity? A quick check, start for 10. Good. That's good, because you will do by the end of this, all right? So, and I just think that it's really essential that the charity really sets the tone for the afternoon, because our values and our vision for the future are all in complete alignment with the values of Edith. And we were set up as a charity shortly after the funeral for nurses, and that was about providing homes. That was the original thing. And for many of you, you will know that Edith had this great dream to build retirement homes should she return from Belgium from the war. And that's an important, because not only did she build lifelong learning and education for nurses, and she led amongst a patriarchal society a collaborative approach to learning when in Brussels. So she taught physicians and nurses together. She supported registration for nurses. That's really important, because as a nurse, I was always really called a blasphemist, to be honest, because I've always preferred Edith and not Florence. And I was in terrible trouble for that. And that is because I channel Edith, and that's life before I was a nurse, because she is 100 years and one day older than I am. Work it out, but don't say my age. Being a 3rd of December gal, and Edith being the 4th. But also, what I always believed is we are here to serve patients. We have a duty as nurses and midwives, and that is as strong now as it's ever been. And Cavell, now you know why it was set up, but it's now become the UK, so we're UK-wide, we are the largest charitable funder specifically for nurses and midwives. We do not support healthcare support workers any longer from a financial awards, purely because, like many charities, that has become a struggle. And you all know that we have to focus on our professionals, and I must speak for the midwives as well, because it is both. And we know that the greatest struggle for nurses and midwives is facing, like many, financial crisis, but also the stress and burnout being part of a very difficult environment within which they work. So last year we had nearly 6,000 applications for financial support, of which we were able to give 1,700 financial awards to nurses and midwives in extremis. We could actually do thrice that now, because the applications from registered nurses and midwives are up by 26%, and these are urgent. Our USP for that hardship support, and hardly anyone knows this, and we're the only charity that can do it, we get money into their bank account on that day. So if they've got a bailiff knocking at the door, we sort it. Now, what is really sad is we are helping with food, and many hospitals, I know at the Norfolk and Norwich we set up a food bank, clothing, and many organisations have done the same. But we are providing financial support for food, buying white goods, fridges, where people are moving into rented accommodation, we're having to buy carpets. We are providing money to pay urgent bills at that point of real stress and hardship, and that amounted to just under £800,000 last year. But we also provide online support, so we have a support hub, so we do emotional, psychological, as well as practical help. And we have a benefits calculator, we provide debt advice. If we don't know the answer, we have all of these experts that we can signpost nurses and midwives to, and we help them with budget and planning. But we also provide well-being resources. We are now moving, as part of our new strategy, away from just being a financial crisis, and we're being proactive. And the well-being is incredibly important in how we are working with the 4 chief nursing officers across the 4 countries to make sure that we get those nurses and midwives back into the workforce. Many have had long-term sick, many have had significant stress and burnout. And we are now supporting large numbers of those who are victims of domestic violence. And last year we managed to support nurses and midwives with unclaimed benefits amounting to £3 million. It's not all about financial crisis. We also have had for some years the accolade of the United Kingdom Cavell Star Awards, and it's a beautiful statue. And families, patients, teammates, colleagues can nominate their nurse or midwife, or a team. It doesn't have to just be an individual. And those awards are prestigious and hard fought. And being a nurse, I can have a conversation with the 4 CNOs, and there is something called the Pathway to Excellence, which is, Terry would know, who's out there, that England is following the American Nurses Association. We're trying to have these a little bit, I suppose, like the magnet hospitals, but they are American Nursing Association accreditation, and we are following a very similar path. And I have thrown the gauntlet down to certainly the CNO England and CNO Wales and said, why isn't the Cavell Star Awards in those? We have the Daisy Awards, they are American, but we must have the Cavell Star Awards. In order to be prospective and proactive, to support nurses and midwives back into the workforce, we are really working alongside all of the wellbeing national initiatives. But we now provide wellbeing coaching, and we have launched that this year, and we are providing structured, independent, emotional support with reflective listening and coaching designed to support the professionals who are dealing with untold stress and real return to work challenges. This is about giving people, our nurses and midwives, the tools and headspace to stay in the professions or come back in with early intervention, but not a crisis response. And we now have 4 times a year a return to work course because people on long-term sick who have been out of their role for a while, it's frightening. And they think, I can't go back into that. And we're also supporting nurses and midwives. Well, you may not want to go back into that role, but what about this role? So that's using our coaching and facilitation. But you can imagine, you see, retention has to be foremost for all of the chief nursing officers across the 4 countries. And so that is the shift. We are now much more providing the future, that the professionals stay in the professions. So you might think, well, who are these nurses and midwives? Aren't they working? 80% of these nurses and midwives are in paid work. They are working. 66% of them have children, and over half of them are single parents. And we know that we can support them through really difficult times because they are telling us that without Cavell, they would have left the professions. We know that 70% of those employed nurses have turned to us and said, without you, Cavell, without your support, your guidance, your coaching, we would not have gone back into the professions. And those that are applying to us, they are telling us that now they're able to budget and that they are able to manage some of the really stressful situations they're in. But just to let you know that the ones that are applying, 42% of those that applied to us were for basic needs such as food and clothing, heat and light. And 29% of them faced health challenges, even though they're working, and half of those had children, over half had children. 17% now are facing domestic violence, coercive and controlling partners, which has led to a financial issue for them. And 6% last year that applied to us were facing homelessness because they couldn't pay their bills. These are registered nurses and midwives who are currently working. But what we do know is that when we speak to them, we know that we gave them the value, the support, the safety net. We were the go-to. And we will continue to serve. That is our role. We have a new 3-year strategy, and I'm pleased as the chair to be able to lead that strategy, and it is about championing the voice and influence for nursing and midwifery, celebrating about recognition and improving and increasing that morale, but also providing the care, support and well-being. And it's that wraparound support, which includes longer-term coaching, mentorship, return to work support, to help recover emotionally, physically and psychologically, but to stay and remain well, to stay and remain in the workforce. Our future is much more not just about crisis now, but actually the longer term, which is the vision that Edith had. She was in the crisis moment, and yet she knew there was a longer term support for nursing that was needed. And we now are very much around prevention, retention and long-term support. And this structured matrix will be the go-to for the chief nurses for England and does align with all of the national workforce well-being initiatives. But what can I say? We cannot do enough in this strategy. It's got to be a practical commitment. It is a promise and a practical commitment. It is not just words. And this is not just in times of crisis, but we want to celebrate the nurse and midwifery contribution to excellence when they are inspiring pride, when they're inspiring leadership, and improvement, but also bravery. Well, that's what we should be celebrating, because they are brave individuals, and they often do this in silence and under duress. And we heard that from the Canon's speech this morning. It goes unnoticed. They are unsung heroes. So with the new strategy, celebrating, championing and caring for, we know that our pioneer, the remarkable Edith, who is, to me, is a heroine, and I hope to you, who pioneered our professions, but she provided the tone, the drumbeat for our professions, not to just to survive, but to truly thrive, to progress, and to persist in their campaign, every nurse and midwife's campaign, to put patients at the centre of their care, as she did. She has made a powerful difference to nursing and midwifery, but also to me. And she set the standards, the highest standards for nursing, for an education and learning, and practical support are the tenets of what we do at the charity. And just to say that everything that she did to herald the profession, we want to herald the professionals. We need to make sure they are protected, valued, and that their achievements do not go unnoticed. We will always be there at the Cavell charity for every nurse and every midwife, as she was. And I have a colleague with me from the charity, Robert Tunmore, who I'd like to introduce you to. He is an absolute expert, and Robert is the external relations lead at the charity with me. And I'd like to invite Robert just to talk in the last few minutes about his personal account and experience of Edith Cavell. And I think that will be the most beautiful segue for our speakers who follow on from me. So thank you very much indeed for me, and here over is Robert.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I am thrilled to bits to be here and mark the occasion of the 110th centenary, and you'll hear why now. I've given a little bit of thought to what Edith meant to me personally and put that down. So I'm going to read through my account just for a few minutes to give you some sense of the connection I feel towards Edith Cavell. So first of all, it's a great privilege to be here on this day and to commemorate the life and work of Edith. I'm very proud to be here on 3 counts. First of all, it's on behalf of my family and other families of soldiers who Edith helped during the World War I. So my relative, you're going to hear a little bit more about in a moment, but also, secondly, as a nurse, on behalf of my profession, you've heard about what a great role model is for Nancy and for many other nurses as well, and how she set the standards and pace for future developments. And thirdly, on behalf of my colleagues at the charity that was set up in her name, you've heard what the charity does. I'm very proud to be part of that. And it was brilliant to have the opportunity to go and work for them when the opportunity arose. So that's 5 years on. I'm still thrilled to bits to be that. So, thinking about my relative, Sergeant Jesse Tunmore, following the retreat from Mons, he was one of the first soldiers to be rescued by Edith Cavell. He was a member of the 1st Norfolk Battalion, so a local guy, and him and Private Lewis from the Cheshire Regiment had for 4 months managed to evade capture behind enemy lines. Some friendly Belgians directed them to the hospital where Edith Cavell was matron, and they arrived on the 23rd of December 1914, so just before Christmas. And Sergeant Tunmore recognised the picture on the wall. So it was this rather fantastic building here. And it was that brought Edith's trust in him as someone she could recognise as being truthful about where he'd come from and about the story he was telling about his experience. He was very pleased to be with Edith Cavell and her nurses for Christmas. So that's part of the time he was with her. They wouldn't have known it, but they were among the first of several hundred soldiers that Edith helped escape back out of occupied Belgium and back, many of them to fight in the war once they'd recovered. They wouldn't have known that at the time, of course. So eventually, after several attempts, each with Edith's support, Sergeant Jesse Tunmore made it back to England, later returning to fight. When Edith's body was repatriated in 1919, he was a pallbearer at a funeral at Norwich Cathedral. So he thought very highly of Edith and wanted her to be recognised and rewarded in some way. Another among the first soldiers was a Private Scott. He was also from the Norfolk Regiment. His great-grandson, yes, I got that right, his great-grandson, Matthew, composed a song about how Edith had rescued his great-grandfather. And this, he reflects on how, without her support, neither he nor his young family would exist today. So he wrote, "She sent you away from the guns of Europe, from Belgium's lines across the sea. I see the names of the ones she gave her life for. She saved you, so she saved me." So what can we learn about Edith Cavell and her relevance to us today? According to Dr. Emma Cavell, a descendant of Edith's uncle and a historian, the truth, she says, the truth is that Edith was a tough 49-year-old woman who knew precisely the danger she was placing herself in. She admitted quite frankly that about what she had done and doesn't appear to have been afraid of the consequences. She was simply a principled woman who was determined to do what she thought right. You see the same things repeating themselves. Women caught up in a system over which they have little overt or direct control. But just because they weren't in the front line of military and political roles, you should never overlook how women, like Nurse Edith, influenced events from behind the scenes. Putting the needs of others before their own is a theme that we at Cavell recognise amongst those nurses and midwives that we support, and perhaps a trait that some of you will recognise too. I hope that hearing from these relatives and descendants 110 years on gives a richness and pertinence to her legacy and shapes what you make of the rest of the afternoon today. And as far as my own family is concerned, a couple of years ago, my then 3-year-old nephew Elliot came to lay a wreath at Edith's statue in London with us. He wasn't the slightest bit interested in laying a family wreath, far more interested in what he saw as a very big paddling pool in Trafalgar Square. But the thing is, his birthday is the 23rd of December, over hundreds of years later, but it's the day that Sergeant Jesse Tunmore and Sergeant Lewis met Edith Cavell in Belgium. So his story will be the Cavell story, my story, for a long, long time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Robert. A brief moment for any questions, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask at this point. Then we'll move on to our next talk. I need to say this very carefully. Professor Emmanuel Debruyne from Louvain University is an authority on the underground networks in Belgium that Edith was involved in. And he comes to speak to us this afternoon on Edith Cavell's network an escape line in occupied territories.
Thanks a lot. Okay. The very first words of my book on the Cavell network, published in 2015, are devoted to Norwich Cathedral and to the grave of Edith Cavell. And it is somewhat in this capacity that I am here today as a historian, addressing you with my picturesque accent. Yet, my book is not devoted to Edith Cavell, and my presentation will not be centered on Edith Cavell. What I propose is precisely to decenter ourselves from Edith Cavell, and in doing so, by changing perspective, to be able afterwards to return to her and better understand who she was and what she did, by better understanding with whom and in what context she did it. I am therefore going to speak to you about the Cavell network. It is essential, however, before anything else, to understand that I use this expression, for want of a better term, to designate a network that was not her creation, and of which she was not, strictly speaking, the head or the center either, but simply a network in which she was active, and of which she became, through the very impact that accompanied her death, the best-known figure by far. And this after the network has ceased all activity due to its dismantlement. Indeed, Edith Cavell was not alone in working in the shadows. She was not alone in being arrested, and she was not alone in dying at the hands of the Germans. Practically everything she did with others, and everything she endured was because she had acted with others. I am therefore going to speak to you as much about the others as about Cavell, or rather about the network they formed. And this word, network, must be understood both in its sense of a clandestine organization and as a set of nodes connected by links. Edith Cavell is in this sense one of these nodes. And the web formed by the links connecting them, which you see here on the screen, is rich in information. So, at the beginning of the war, this web did not exist. Most of the future members of the network did not know each other and would probably never have known each other had there not been the war. In August 1914, Belgium was invaded, and from 20th of August onwards, Brussels was occupied. It was in this context of invasion that the first links were woven. In the Mons region, as throughout Belgium, local figures organized ambulances. That's to say, places to heal Belgian soldiers wounded in the battles to come. But at Mons, on the 23rd of August, the British Army, for the first time in its history, confronted the German army. Defeated, the British Army was forced into a long retreat and abandoned numerous wounded on site. No fewer than 1,257 British soldiers were immediately taken in charge by Belgian ambulances. Too busy pursuing the British Army, the German troops were happy to temporarily offload this burden onto the Belgians. In the Borinage, the region surrounding Mons, one of these ambulances was that of Ornu and WAM, directed by Herman Capiot, a mining engineer and polyglot. This ambulance took charge of 54 wounded men. One of them
was Colonel James Gibbs, Duke of Wellington Regiment, who agreed with Engineer Capiot to discreetly send the convalescent back towards the supposed positions of the Allies. We are at the end of the summer 1914, and these maneuvers were the first acts of transgression against the German order now imposed on the occupied country. Autumn 1914 saw the progressive liquidation of the ambulances by the Germans, as the British wounded, among whom was Colonel Gibbs, recovered sufficiently to be sent to prisoner camps in Germany. Nevertheless, other Allied soldiers remained present in the Borinage, or further south, on the other side of the French border, in the forest of Mormal. Hundreds of soldiers had indeed become lost during the retreat of the British Expeditionary Force and had to hide. They were helped by the inhabitants, who naturally themselves sought support from the organizers of the ambulances, like Herman Capiot. Indeed, these had resources and were now accustomed to dealing with British military personnel. One could not yet speak of an organized network, but links were being woven away from the gaze of the occupiers. At this stage, Edith Cavell was present in Brussels, but was not involved in these clandestine activities. As Dr. Depage, the director of her school, had joined the army, the Belgian army, at the beginning of the war, Cavell had to cope at this time with heavy responsibilities. She had to not only ensure the continuity of teaching at Rue de la Culture in Brussels, but also oversee the construction work begun shortly before the war on a new building intended for her school. Several of her students were also sent to provide care to the wounded of both sides treated at the ambulance established at the Royal Palace in Brussels. In early November 1914, 3 men coming from the Borinage presented themselves to Cavell at Rue de la Culture. They were sent her by the wife of Dr. Depage, who worked in close collaboration with Cavell. The first of these men was Herman Capiot, the engineer. The other 2 were British military men in civilian clothes, hidden and fed since summer by modest inhabitants of the Borinage. The impossibility for them of rejoining their unit across a front that had become impenetrable, as well as the cost and danger weighing on the shoulders of their hosts, prompted them to attempt to leave the occupied country by the north, by crossing the border separating Belgium from the neutral Netherlands. Sorry, I've lost my sentence. Yes. So from the Netherlands, where they could reach England, Capiot convinced Cavell to shelter her compatriots until they found the means to leave the country. The 2 Britons were in fact only the first of a series. Capiot was indeed in the process of establishing a network in Mons and the Borinage to take charge of these soldiers, notably by calling upon the organizers of other ambulances, such as his friend, the lawyer Albert Libier. Capiot needed a safe relay in Brussels, from where they could be exfiltrated towards Netherlands. Cavell, who had premises and could easily communicate with those being exfiltrated, became the main dropping point in Brussels. She was not, however, alone in performing this task, insofar as the network also recruited private individuals at whose homes the fugitive could wait to be taken in charge by guides who would enable them to cross the Dutch border. In February 1915, the network extended southwards beyond the French border by connecting a group active in the forest of Mormal, led by schoolteacher Louis Tullier and two representatives of the high aristocracy, Prince Réginald de Crouy and his sister Marie. These resided at the Château de Belligny, which two had first served as an ambulance, then as a hiding place for British soldiers who had become lost during the retreat. And in April 1915, when the Germans methodically organized the complete closure of the Dutch border by means of an electric fence, the network was forced to revise its organization of the border crossing. It enlisted a Brussels architect, Philippe Bauque, who had a small group with which he took charge of this crucial question of crossing the border. Cavell was therefore only one cog in an evasion line in which approximately 180 people participated. You see all these people there. It's more or less geographically organized, even if you are not able to read the names. So 180 people participated, but an important cog. Cavell was an important cog since she constituted one of the principal organizers along with Louis Tullier, the school teacher, Herman Capiot, and the Prince de Crouy. The organization convoyed British military personnel cut off from their units and probably succeeded in exfiltrating more than 200 of them. British military personnel were not, however, the only ones taken in charge. Dozens of French soldiers, isolated following the Battle of Charleroi and the fall of Maubeuge, were also taken in charge. Among those exfiltrated there was also a growing number of young Belgian and French civilians wishing to join the army. It's difficult to reconstruct with precision the identity and journey of these people, military or volunteers, who were exfiltrated by the network. The journey of the French soldier Dumorat, however, enables us to embody in a fairly typical manner one of these journeys. Originally from Bordeaux, Dumorat was wounded on 27th of August at Nouvion-en-Thiérache, more than 700 kilometers from his home in a region of France completely unknown to him. After wandering for months in occupied territory, he was taken in by a farmer, César Aplincourt, who was in contact with the network. Aplincourt then entrusted him to a couple of industrialists, Evans and Béatrice Maillard. These organized his departure towards Belgium in early April 1915 by handing him over to the care of a first escort, who then entrusted him to the schoolteacher Louis Tullier. She brought him to the de Crouy princes at the Château de Belligny. He stayed there for 2 days before being conveyed by Tullier towards the Borinage. Capiot organized his journey to Brussels, where on the 9th of April 1915, Cavell and Bauque entrusted him to the pharmacist Louis Séverin until his exfiltration to the Netherlands could be organized. On 30th of April 1915, Dumorat finally crossed the border. Conversely, the network was not a spy network. I have been able to identify more than 200 intelligence networks in Belgium and occupied France, operating for Belgian, French, or in the majority of cases, British services. And the Cavell network was not one of them. It was, however, certain that Capiot confided military intelligence to some of his candidates for exfiltration. A report has notably been preserved and is used nowadays as supposed proof to feed the myth claiming that Cavell was a spy. in the dozens of unpublished or published testimonies of network members that I have consulted, it is never mentioned that the network would have regularly practiced the collection and transmission of intelligence. It was a sporadic and rather primitive activity, which was proven only for Capio and a few other network members who, in fact, only seized opportunities. It had nothing to do with the much more developed, regular, and documented practices of the dozens of real intelligence networks active at the same time in occupied territory. Nothing proves that Cavell in any way participated in the collection or transmission of intelligence. This report, and perhaps others, could perfectly well have used the network as a transmission vector without passing through Cavell, and very probably without Cavell even being aware of its existence. Members of the network had, moreover, individually deployed other clandestine activities besides intelligence, sometimes using some of their contacts with the network to practice this activity. Without going into details, let us note that this was the case with the architect Philippe Bauque, who played a key role in organizing the distribution of La Libre Belgique, Free Belgium, the most famous of clandestine newspapers in occupied Belgium. This was also the case with several network members, including Bauque again, active in Le Mot du Soldat, the soldier's word, a clandestine postal organization arranging correspondence between Belgian soldiers at the front and their families remaining in occupied territory. I shall be brief in describing the social composition of the network, but it seems to me especially important to emphasize its very great diversity, since one found there the entire social range from prince to mining worker, passing through lawyer or cafe owner. Out of 179 members, 66 or more than a third were women. Many had rather peripheral roles and acted with their husband or sometimes with their father. But those who had the greatest centrality in terms of network analysis, that's to say who had the most links and very often the most responsibility, were unmarried women. Edith Cavell, Louise Tullier, and Princess Marie de Crouy were in this respect typical of the link between celibacy and level of responsibility in the resistance. Married women were confined to subordinate tasks. More generally, the people who had the greatest centrality were all in one way or another prominent local figures. And from this point of view, the four people who constituted the true driving forces of the network were Louise Tullier, schoolteacher, Edith Cavell, nurse and school director, Réginald de Crouy, member of the highest European aristocracy, and Herman Capio, engineer. All had significant social capital, which translated into a vast network of acquaintances, ease of movement, engagement in Red Cross ambulances, knowledge of foreign languages, and material means. So many advantages that could be put to use for the network. This trend remains perceptible if one widens the focus to the 10 most central nodes, which, however, include the postman Octave Malice, which is more an exception than the rule. In a society as ideologically divided as Belgian society of the period, which organized itself into socio-confessional pillars, communicating little with each other, it's interesting to note that the different groups belonged, some to the Catholic pillar in yellow, the group of the Forest of Mormal and the Bauque group, and the others to the anti-clerical pillar in blue, Capio group and Cavell group. but that this did not in the least prevent them from facing adversity together, even though they were composed of people who probably would not have spoken to each other in peacetime. On the contrary, one can even estimate that this bringing into contact of different pillars enabled the network to diversify its resources and therefore its possibilities. On the night of the 31st of July to 1st of August 1915, Louis Tullier and Philippe Boeck were arrested at the latter's home in Schaerbeek in Brussels by the Zentralpolizeistelle, the German secret police. Boeck had in fact been under surveillance for several days because of his activities for La Libre Belgique, had been denounced by one of his acquaintances. The secret police agents improvised an arrest when they noticed that a suspicious person was presenting herself at Boeck's home. By bad luck, this person was Louis Tullier. The dismantlement of the network was therefore not linked to its infiltration by a double agent, but rather to the multiplication of clandestine activities of one of its members, Boeck, which led to the unfortunate arrest of another one of its principal organizers, Tullier. The documents seized and the confessions obtained during interrogations, beginning with those of Tullier, enabled the network to be dismantled within a few weeks. Cavell was arrested as early as the 5th of August, the same day as Herman Capiot. Over the following weeks, some 30 members were still arrested by the secret police and sent to Saint-Gilles prison in Brussels. Heinrich Pinkhoff, the principal investigator, succeeded in obtaining numerous confessions without any violence, but through manipulation. It's important to dispel this other myth, which would have it that being of a fundamentally honest nature, Cavell was ontologically incapable of hiding the truth from the investigators. This is totally false. Network analysis reveals that of the 31 network members with whom Cavell had been in contact, only 11 were arrested. Doubtless, Cavell made partial confessions, like most of the other network members, but she concealed more links than she acknowledged. Nevertheless, the investigation enabled the secret police to get their hands on the principal network members and dozens of their collaborators. Prince de Crouy was the only big fish to escape arrest. On 7th October 1915, Edith Cavell, Herman Capiot, Louis Tullier, Marie de Crouy, Albert Libier, and 30 other people appeared before the military tribunal that the occupiers installed in the hemicycle of the Belgian Senate, requisitioned for the occasion. The hearing lasted 2 days, and the judges were heavy-handed, pronouncing 5 death sentences and 22 prison sentences or hard labor sentences, often of long duration. Only 8 people were acquitted. Appeals for clemency were immediately lodged, particularly by the Spanish and the United States legations. 3 of those condemned to death benefited from this, but the fate of Edith Cavell and Philippe Boeck was already sealed. Both were executed by firing squad at dawn on 12th of October. The other convicts were deported to serve their sentences in the German penal establishments of Rheinbach and Siegburg, where they suffered from malnutrition and lack of care. This stay proved fatal for 3 of them. 3 others were so weakened that they died shortly after their return from deportation, and another who had escaped the 1915 arrests, was shot following his engagement in another network. 2 other network members also committed suicide following the suffering caused by their arrest. The network's activities were therefore not only fatal to Edith Cavell, but led in total to the death of 11 of its members. Despite this carnage, only the name of Edith Cavell has remained in memory, as well as to a certain extent that of Book, shot alongside her and whose memory had been maintained in Brussels. Cavell died, but her legend was born, that of an English nurse cowardly murdered by the Germans, a legend peddled and amplified by the British and then international press. Voluntary enlistments in the British Army experienced a spectacular rise in the weeks that followed, and soon streets, hospitals, and even geological formation bore her name in Brussels and London, but also Paris, Canada, and even on the planet Venus. I shall not dwell further on the memory of Edith Cavell, but it seems important to me to specify that after the war, no fewer than 9 people published their testimony regarding their involvement in the network. The best known being those of Louise Tullier and Marie de Crouy, even if the most important, but unfortunately less known, is undoubtedly that of the lawyer Albert Libier, Herman Capio's friend. The foregrounding of Cavell's death and the memoirs of Louise Tullier and Marie de Crouy left, moreover, a somewhat distorted image of the Cavell network as being primarily a women's network, when this was not particularly the case. It would indeed be more accurate to say that women played a driving role there alongside their male counterparts, which was rarely the case in most other networks being male networks. More generally, one can also note that people enjoying significant social capital, like Cavell, but also the other leaders of the network, beginning with Louise Tullier or Marie de Crouy, had more opportunity to leave a trace in collective memory, whether by being honored or by becoming memory bearers themselves. The others, nevertheless, also acted in the shadows, risked and sometimes lost their lives, but they never left this shadow, whether during their lifetime or after their death. So you will forgive me for ending my address by leaving my role as historian. I simply wish to take advantage of the occasion to bring them briefly out of the shadow by enumerating in alphabetical order and placing on the same footing all the victims of this terrible story, whatever their social status and the reason of their death. Philippe Boeck, Edith Cavell, Constant Quéron, aged 17, Jérôme de Chotte, Louis Gilles, Paul Godefroy, Charles Joniot, Alfred Lepoint, Marie Mouton, Maurice Pansard, Louise Tellier, not Tullier. I shall add a 12th name, that of a network member who engaged once again in the resistance in 1940 and who died in August 1943 at Esterwegen concentration camp, Albert Libier. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for that moving testimony. Briefly, are there any questions people would like to ask before we move on? But there'll be an opportunity to speak with Emmanuel after the program. But thank you very much for that other dimension. Candice Millard is a best-selling biographer in the United States, and her most recent project is working with Edith and her network of Belgian women colleagues. And so she will now share with us some of her researches and reflections on that. Candice, thank you very much for being with us. She's come all the way from the States for this event, so we're particularly grateful.
It's a great honor and pleasure to be here with all of you, this very important and beautiful cathedral, and especially with my fellow speakers today, whom I have come to know and deeply respect, and to whom I owe a great debt of gratitude. People who have been incredibly generous to me and helped me immeasurably in my efforts to understand Edith Cavell. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to thank them publicly. We live in a time when people are competing for attention, good, bad, online and off. They want recognition, they crave fame, usually having done nothing to earn it, or at least nothing that's of benefit to anyone but themselves. The subject of this ceremony today, the reason we are all gathered here, had the polar opposite instinct. She was the definition of modesty, selflessness, and quiet courage. Edith Cavell devoted her life to helping others, and she died because she insisted on helping others, no matter the cost. But she never sought recognition. Obviously, the work she did, which led to her execution, had of necessity to be done in secret. But the work she devoted her life to, nursing, also left no room for self-aggrandizement. It was, she said, a great and honorable profession. It was a rare opportunity for the widest social reform, the purest philanthropy, the truest humanity. Nurses, by necessity and by inclination, put others before themselves. Not only did Edith have no interest in claiming the spotlight, she understood that most things, to be done well, cannot be done alone. She saw the value in what today we might think of as teamwork, but which she probably would have termed cooperation. In fact, it was essential to nearly everything she did, and more often than not, in her world, the people on her team were women. In general, women understand the importance of cooperation, of community, of supporting one another, learning from one another, confiding in and trusting one another. Edith understood it better than most. From her earliest days here in Norwich, Edith Cavell wrung every bit of joy and wonder that she could out of life, whether she was skating on a frozen pond in Swardeston, climbing the ancient cedar tree on the Blewett sisters' front lawn, or sneaking a cigarette in her father's study. She was also eager to learn, and after she was homeschooled by her father, her teachers were largely women. There was Margaret Gibson, the eccentric headmistress of Laurel Court, the boarding school Edith attended in Peterborough. Ms. Gibson wore a black dress with a long train and muddy boots which she would not clean for anyone. She decorated her sitting room with an old wolfskin rug that reeked to high heaven, and she had very little interest in men, whom she called the Adamses. But she was very smart, and her school excelled in the study of music, art, languages, and high moral training, all fields that Edith herself would excel in. Then, of course, there was Eva Lucas, matron of the famous London Hospital in Whitechapel, where Edith studied to become a nurse. Florence Nightingale herself hailed Lucas as the matron of matrons, and she was. She had been only 26 years old when she had accepted the job, but she had immediately, within 24 hours of her appointment, demanded large-scale reforms, better meals for the nurses, better dormitories, fewer menial tasks, and more thorough training. She was also a harsh mentor, referring to her students as big and clumsy or intensely conceited and not very clever. Even Edith Cavell, whom she determined not a success, didn't escape her censure. But Edith respected Lucas. She learned from her, and she stayed in touch with her for many years through every position Edith accepted, which was always serving the poorest of the poor. She was a night nurse at St. Pancras Infirmary, which was attached to a workhouse. She was an assistant matron at Swardeston Infirmary, which was so dangerous that the nurses were not allowed to step outside without the protection of their uniforms, and never after dark. And then Manchester, where her principal patients were ill and injured coal miners, and where she became known as a poor man's Nightingale. When, in the spring of 1907, Edith accepted an offer from the Belgian surgeon Antoine Depage to run the first training school for nurses in Belgium, she turned to Eva Lucas for advice, for commiseration over the shocking state of the place when she first arrived, and eventually for probationers to help fill her school. In Belgium, Edith was finally able to choose the women who would come into her life. There were her probationers, of course, but there were also her two assistant matrons, Elizabeth Wilkins, who was soft-spoken and had a slight Welsh accent, and who would later recall how Edith's severe expression would disappear when she smiled. And Millicent White, a beautiful Irish redhead with a heavy brogue and a quick temper, striking fear in the hearts of probationers and medical students alike. No one in Edith's life, however, had as quick and ferocious a temper as the only male she allowed to live with her, our sort of esteemed guest today, if you had a chance to go see him, her stray Belgian sheepdog, Jack, who rarely left her side. He accompanied her on her morning walks, he sat at her feet at every meal, and he ferociously guarded her from any interloper, threatening or friendly. Jack hated everyone, and they hated him. From the nursing students whom he would chase up the stairs after dinner, nipping at their ankles, to any visitor who was foolish enough to try to pet him. For 7 years, this was Edith Cavell's life, overseeing the establishment of a brand new school, caring for patients, educating the next generation of nurses, and battling a staunch, tight-lipped, hands-on-hips resistance to serious scientific nursing. It was stressful, exhausting work, but it was also deeply satisfying and, with the help of Sisters White and Wilkins, manageable, even at times a joy. Then came the summer of 1914, when a teenage Serbian nationalist with a Belgian gun shot the Archduke of Austria-Hungary and his wife, Sophie, as they drove in an open car through the streets of Sarajevo, setting the world aflame, and by August, sending the Germans marching into Brussels. By November, Edith would be hiding Allied soldiers brought to her from the Borinage, and she would be helping them as an act of extraordinary courage, selflessness, and heroism. It brought unimaginable danger into Edith's life, and by extension, the lives of her probationers and staff. It also eventually brought into her life two more exceptional women, a school teacher and a princess, both of whom would share with Edith the risk, the danger, and over time, a remarkable bond, forged not in fear, but in the same silent determination that radiates from Edith's face, even in photographs, undiminished by time and distance. The French schoolteacher Louise Toulier was home on holiday in the summer of 1914 when the bells in her village in northern France began to ring. War on its way. Louise had grown up surrounded by the still fresh memory of the Franco-Prussian War and a national admiration for heroism that bordered on idolatry. Our parents and teachers instilled into our young hearts an immense love for France, our suffering motherland, she wrote, and a lively hero worship for those who had given their lives for her. Now it was Louise's turn, and she wanted nothing more than to join the fight. As a woman, there was little she could do beyond becoming a nurse, but the Red Cross turned her away, claiming to already have too many young, inexperienced nurses. Frustrated and unsure what to do next, she took comfort in her brother's final words to her before he himself left for the war. "Don't worry," he told her. "God, in his own good time, will give you a chance to serve." She would never see him again, but his words would come true in a way and to a degree that neither of them could have foreseen. In late August, as the British were forced to retreat, they left behind 6 soldiers in Louise's little town, 2 wounded to go another mile. Louise and her friend Henriette decided to care for them. They broke into an abandoned bakery to bake bread for them, and they hid them in Henriette's house. When the Germans arrived, however, they were forced to make a dangerous decision: turn the men over, as the Germans' dictates demanded, or continue to hide them, knowing that if they were caught, the punishment would likely be the loss of their own lives, as well as those of the men they were trying to help. Only one solution to the problem remained, Louise wrote: to see to it that the men disappeared. So she and Henriette did what people in the region had done for centuries when they had a problem. They went to Belligny. Belligny is a medieval chateau in northern France, just over the border with Belgium. And it is where Marie de Croilly and her brothers and their grandmother lived. And it is where Marie enters the story. They came from an aristocratic family that, much like the British royal family, spanned much of Europe. Known as the House of Croilly, it is believed to descend from a Hungarian prince who married an heiress to the French barony of Croilly in the 12th century. Marie's branch of the de Croilly family was Belgian. In fact, the Belgian king, Albert I, was her cousin. But she had been born in England to a British mother and raised in northern France, in Belligny. The chateau had been a fixture on the landscape of northern France for centuries. It is nearly 5,000 square feet and 4 stories high. It has more than 25 bedrooms, and it looks out over 10 acres of manicured grounds surrounded by a stone wall. When Marie lived there, a peacock and a crane named Cleopatra sauntered in regal companionship across the lawn, looking like a pair of aristocrats at leisure. But Belligny's oldest and most memorable feature is a 100-foot tall tower that was built in the 13th century. The walls of this tower are 9 feet thick, perfect in the past for imprisoning enemies, and in 1914 for hiding Allied soldiers. As soon as the war had begun and their brother Leopold had left to fight, Reginald and Marie had turned Belligny into a hospital. Soon after that, it became occasional living quarters for British and then, to Marie's outrage, German officers. In late September, with the arrival of Louise and Henriette, it became a refuge, and a partnership began. Louise and Henriette would find men, most of them in or around the forest of Mormont, having been left behind after battles, either wounded or just lost in the chaos. And Marie and Reginald would do their best to hide and care for them. A few years earlier, the siblings had discovered a forgotten staircase winding through the middle of their tower, hidden behind those 9-foot thick walls, accessed through a window at the bottom and walled off at the top. All it needed was camouflage, which they quickly gave it, turning the entrance into a cupboard complete with shelves filled with bottles, and adding a panel at the back that could be easily removed so a young man could crawl into or out of the staircase and then slide the panel back in place behind him. The problem, beyond the fact that the Germans were making frequent, unannounced inspections of Belligny, was that there were soon more men than they could feed, and far more than they could fit inside the tower. It was at this critical juncture that they heard about a British nurse in Brussels who had been not just hiding men, but using guides to help them escape through the border with the Netherlands. Slowly, a network formed, dozens of people helping however they could. Men, of course, played extremely important roles in this network, as you heard earlier: Reginald, Herman Capio, Philippe Boeck. And Boeck, who, as we heard earlier, helped distribute an underground newspaper, guided men to the Netherlands, and did some spying along the way. But his feats at times went beyond courage to breathtaking recklessness. Still, I don't think anyone would disagree with the assertion that among the people at the heart of this network were Edith, Marie, and Louise, three unmarried, childless women from completely different walks of life, but all smart, serious, incredibly composed, and unimaginably brave. They rarely met, which was the most effective way to keep them safe, but also the most practical. After the war began, Edith never ventured across the border to France, too busy with her life within and outside of the network. Louise often made the long, perilous journey to Brussels, usually leading a group of men hoping to escape, but she did not always take them to Edith. And on one of the few times she did, Jack nearly tore her hand off when she tried to pet him. Marie visited Edith only once to warn her that the work that they were doing had become too dangerous. Edith agreed, but she insisted that before they stop, they help the last men in their care. By then, it was too late, and they knew it. It was only a matter of time before the secret police came for them. Of course, this story ended in tragedy, is the reason we are gathered here today. But the epilogue is so much more than the heartbreak of that devastating day in October of 1915, or the years of misery the survivors were forced to endure in German prisons. Marie returned to Belligny, now sagging and broken, a shadow of the grand chateau it had once been, her grandmother, and even her elegant crane, Cleopatra, gone. And Louise made it back to her village near the forest of Mormal, although the forest, like Belligny, had been ravaged by the war, the Germans having ceaselessly plundered it for years. But given a chance, forests grow back, and chateaus can be repaired. Wounds can heal. And while memories can fade, they can also be strengthened through the work of historians like Emmanuel and the fine minds and dedicated spirit of people like Nick, Andrew, and Peter, all of whom have taught me so much about Edith Cavell. Of course, I learned from Marie and Louise as well, both of whom wrote books, excellent, detailed, fascinating books after they returned home. And I learned from Edith herself through her letters and even through a fragment of her diary, which was found sewn inside a cushion decades after her death. Most of all, I think, I learned from the relationship between this trio of brave women. Not really friends, perhaps, but possibly something more: allies, willing to sacrifice their safety, their comfortable worlds, their lives, to help people they did not know, had never met before. Their work was also in the service of an idea. This idea was not patriotism, although several members of the network did attest at their trials that they were patriots. But Edith, of course, just hours before her death, as you know, made it clear that patriotism is not enough. And she warned us in her way against allowing bitterness and hatred to burrow their way into our hearts, even during war, even when it would be so easy to hate. No, the idea had to be love. And that, to me, is the most lasting legacy of Edith, Marie, and Louise. Not loss, but love, made possible through forgiveness, through selflessness, through cooperation, and through the enduring lessons of quiet courage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Candice. You've whetted our appetites for your book when it comes out. May it be soon. We are keeping the schedule, but I do suggest we have a 5-minute break now to stand and to stretch and to use the facility if you need to do so. But please be back in 5 minutes, so at 10:10 to. Could I encourage you, please, to resume your seats now? Good. Thank you for resuming your seats, and my apologies that the subject of my talk is a rather an obvious one, but I hope it won't be without interest. Edith's last known words before her execution were conveyed by the German pastor, Paul Le Sueur, who accompanied her to and witnessed her execution. She told him, "Ask Father Gone to tell my loved ones later on that my soul, I believe, is safe and that I am glad to die for my country." The Reverend Horace Sterling Townsend Gone, no, doesn't want to cooperate, so I'll do it that way, had been with Edith that previous night, celebrated communion with her and recited "Abide with me" with her. He was already familiar to her as the Anglican chaplain serving in Brussels at Christ Church, today's Holy Trinity Cathedral. But clearly, this time that they shared would have drawn them together particularly intimately. And yet there was a peculiarity, or an irony, that in that moment she named him as Father Gone. And that small oddity, which I will unpick here, will reveal much about the character of Edith's faith. Of course, Edith knew all about the clergy and about the Church of England more generally, being the daughter of the vicarage in Swardeston. I couldn't find a picture of her father, but a picture of the vicarage and church will stand in. The religion of the parish, as shaped by her father, seems to have been plain and rather severe. Edith undoubtedly supported her father's ministry, most notably when she helped through her drawings and paintings to raise funds to build the Sunday school attached to the vicarage. But perhaps like any daughter would be, perhaps like my own, she was embarrassed by her father's religiosity. She wrote as a teenager to her cousin Eddie, "I'd love to have you visit, but not on a Sunday. It's too dreadful. Sunday school, church services, family devotions, morning and evening, and Father's sermons are so dull." So perhaps it's not surprising that when she escaped into the wider world, that she might have sought out a different kind of religious expression. We don't have records of where Edith went to church for much of the rest of her life, so we don't know when her practice moved in a more Anglo-Catholic direction. It may have been influenced by her time as a governess in Brussels from 1890 to 95, and thereafter she trained for nursing at the London Hospital in the East End of London from 1896 to 99, where there were many Anglo-Catholic parish churches. She owned a copy of Thomas à Kempis' Imitation of Christ, a classic of medieval Catholic spirituality, in the Oxford World's Classics edition. This was first published in 1903, though she may have been familiar with it before then. The first evidence we have of a definite Anglo-Catholic attachment comes from Edith's time in Manchester. In 1906, she was matron at the Manchester and Salford Sick, Poor and Private Nursing Institute, at which time she worshipped at Sacred Trinity Church, Salford, pictured here. This was during the incumbency of Father Peter Green, a noted Anglo-Catholic parish priest. The parish was known for the poverty of its inhabitants and for high unemployment, and Father Green was particularly respected for his work with the local lads, the boys and men of the parish, in a centre set up in the arch of a railway viaduct. The three guiding principles of Father Green's ministry were, first, he was in the tradition of the Oxford Movement Tractarians and was determined to teach sound doctrine. He was also a convinced evangelical and strove for conversions to the faith. And third, he encouraged parishioners to witness to their Christian faith in the world. He was a frequent contributor to the Manchester Guardian, where, as her former parish priest, he noted Edith's death. It is instructive to compare his outspoken opposition to war to Edith's own position. He wrote, "I profoundly disbelieve in the possibility of any good coming of war, and I regard all talk about the war itself as being a moral purge and a wholesome discipline and a school of character, and all the rest of it as being profoundly immoral and anti-Christian or mere moral platitudes." A more vigorous expression of perhaps patriotism is not enough, but in very much the same mindset. When Edith went back to Brussels in 1907, she had two Anglican churches to choose from: Christ Church, which is today Holy Trinity Brussels, and the Church of the Resurrection, which is just down the street from Christ Church. Christ Church was distinctly evangelical, while the Resurrection was Anglo-Catholic, its liturgies enhanced by the use of vestments, music, ceremonial, and incense. Edith worshipped at the Resurrection until it closed. Sorry, there's an interior view, not very clear, but gives you a sense of the place. But in 1914, its chaplain, Father Philip Stocks, having been vacationing in Scotland and not allowed to return to Brussels after the outbreak of war. Shortly thereafter, because of ill health, he and his wife followed their children in immigrating to British Columbia in Canada. And from there, at the end of 1915, he wrote to Edith's mother, Louisa, a moving tribute to Edith, commenting on her dedication as a nurse and the circumstances of her death. A communicant at our church, I'm glad to be able to bear my testimony to her blameless life. Her excellent work was also well known by our family, as we frequently had occasion to visit the sick in her nursing home. And here may I indignantly deny the unworthy statement made by the German authorities, quoted in the Times, that Miss Cavell charged fees which were within the means of rich people only. To take only one instance, she nursed my youngest daughter when the latter had a carbuncle, would take no fee whatever for her own services, and procured the gratuitous assistance of one of the best Brussels surgeons for the operation. And this was one instance out of many. She was one of the kindest and gentlest women I have ever known, never in a hurry, but always ready to do a kind action, refined and high-principled, utterly incapable of treachery or espionage. While Stocks regretted not being able to minister to Edith in her final hours, he did find comfort in the accounts of that time, especially of her wish to have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone, something that he admitted he himself struggled with. He prayed, however, that God would bring good out of this terrible war, as already he is doing through the example of Edith Cavell, not a mere quiet nurse whose one wish was to do her duty among the sick and suffering, but one whose name will always be held as a heroine and as a saint. As we will hear, Stocks was not alone in describing Edith as a saint. When the resurrection closed, Edith then turned to Christ Church, where she worshipped until the end of her life and where she would have come to know Stirling Gone. That is the Holy Trinity Brussels as it is today. Back to Stirling. From her familiarity with Anglo-Catholic customs, she would have been used to calling her priest father. But when we ask whether, on the face of it, it would have made sense to call Stirling Gone father, the answer would be decidedly no. We have a memoir of Stirling from an earlier stage of his ministry around 1910, when he was curate of St Thomas Church, Southborough in Tunbridge Wells. The memoirist was Catherine Tynan, a writer and an Irish Roman Catholic resident of the community. She wrote, "There was another person who came and went that summer and played cricket with the children on the common, who has recently acted a part which shall not be forgotten. Some time in the preceding winter, the vicar's wife had asked me to tea to meet the new curate. 'Such a good Irishman,' she said. 'You will be so much interested in one another.' I was rather doubtful about it. The new curate belonged to a militant Irish Low Church family, and since I had come to Southborough, I had become militant on my own side, at least when I came up against the other militancy. Still, the vicar's wife and I were friends, so I agreed to go, having protested that we should probably make a battleground of her drawing room. The new curate was certainly very Irish to look at. He had, in fact, the face of an Irish priest. He was Irish, although he hated the Pope, and there was enough kindly Irish about him to make me forget my antipathies, and I really think he forgot his. Of course, his views were very narrow, too narrow even for Southborough, and he banned other people's cakes and ale in a way which made other people rather indignant. But perhaps it was the Irish. Beginning with a strong prepossession against him, I came in time to like him. There was a streak of the poet in him and the visionary. I used to meet him on the common talking to the cows, and he would observe the birds by the hour together. It was an odd association between him and the Catholic Irish children who, as soon as they were free, would sally down the common to his lodgings and call to him peremptorily to come and play cricket. He used to come as soon as he could and play as seriously as though he were playing for his school or for varsity. Other children came and joined in, and Father Pat, as we had learned to call him, used to keep them in order, even when the small boy who owned the ball and wanted to go home when he was out. Southborough generally came to call him Father Pat, and when he was so addressed publicly, he took it very well, ascribing its origin to the proper source, but bearing no malice. The other day, this is Kathleen Tynan writing after Edith's execution. The other day, Father Pat, the Reverend Horace Gaughan, turned up as the fearless and faithful chaplain of Edith Cavell's last hours, the man to whom we owe an immense debt for his witnessing to that lofty soul. I could have foretold it of him. He would be perfectly fearless, devoted, and sincere, a good hand to hold in those last moments on earth. For what he was to Edith Cavell, for the immeasurable service he rendered us by setting her there on her pedestal for us to see plain, Sancta Editha, let us remember and praise Father Pat of the great summer. Quite a remarkable memoir, I'm sure you'd agree. And it is a remarkable document in a number of ways and a remarkable tribute. A fiercely Protestant Irishman who hated the Pope and yet who took kindly to playing cricket with Irish Catholic children and who recognized that being called Father Pat by them was a tribute and not an insult. And how remarkable, too, that this Irish woman writer should have recognized Edith's Christian holiness beyond the denominational divide, who is prepared even to call her Sancta Editha. So, despite appearances, it's not altogether surprising that Edith should have called Stirling Gaughan father. I even suspect, though there is no way to prove it, that there might have been an element of affectionate teasing in that designation, based on a long-standing recognition of their shared faith despite their adherence to different kinds of Anglicanism. Certainly, Father Gaughan had been to her everything she needed in a priest, a source of sacramental blessing, a tender friend in time of trouble, and a comfort in distress. And for the priest, Edith's faith was an astonishing and abiding inspiration. Although Pastor Leseur had to look after her burial after the execution, Father Gahn was able to minister to Edith one last time when her body was to be returned to England. At the beginning of that journey, her body was taken on a gun carriage through the crowd-lined streets to the Gare du Nord in Brussels, where he presided at a service for her, blessing her once again for a final journey. In 1923, well after the war, Gahn returned to England to be rector of Thrussington and Brooksby in Leicestershire, where he remained until his death in 1956. We might wonder whether his experiences in the war had mellowed him in any way, but it seems as if he retained his Irish Protestant stiffness right to the end, the one who disapproved of people's cakes and ale in Southborough. Local historians of Brooksby recall that he was remembered as an eccentric. On Sundays, when a cricket match was in progress on the Farm Institute playing field, he would shout, "Sabbath breakers," as he cycled past to Brooksby Church. Another memory was that when he was approached about the possibility of a dance being held in Thrussington, he is alleged to have replied, "Certainly, provided the young men attend on one evening and the young ladies on a different one." All the same, I can't help wondering whether he was playing up to his Protestant Irish stereotypical image, and that there might have been a twinkle in his eye and a tongue in his cheek, in the same way that he was able to cope with being known as Father Pat. As Catherine Tynan observed, there was more to him than the narrowness he presented on the surface. This was a man, after all, who talked to the cows on the common and appeared to take playing cricket with the village boys as seriously as he would playing for his school or college. For Edith, he was the priest that she needed in her final hours. Just as important, whether in life or in death, Edith was the Christian woman who inspired these professional Christian men by her faith-filled perseverance, courage, and commitment, a witness to Christ even to the end of her life. Thank you. I did allude to Edith's final journey, and now to tell us more about that is Andrew Brown, who is the group chairman of the Belgian Edith Cavell Commemoration Group, and has been a great support of me over the years, particularly when we've been taking our Edith Cavell passion paintings to Belgium, to the Catholic Cathedral there, and Andrew's been a great help in trouble and friend in need. So Andrew, please.
Tell me how it works.
Yeah. So if you push the down arrow, number 2, that will change the slide.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine, yeah. Well, it's quite a challenge to speak after so many gifted speakers. I'm sure, Peter, you must be paying them a lot more than you're paying me. As with the others, it's an immense pleasure and privilege to be standing here so close to where Edith Cavell rests in eternal peace after her life's journey so noble, but that ended so tragically. My thanks to the cathedral here and to Peter for organising this gathering and giving me the opportunity to briefly recount the tale of the return of Edith Cavell's mortal remains from Norwich from Brussels in May 1919. She was buried in haste in an unremarkable grave at the place where she was executed on the 12th of October 1915, at the National Firing Range in Brussels. Her grave was marked by a simple wooden cross. Shortly after the end of the war, in December 1918, the local authority on the Red Cross placed a small, square, white marble plaque to give her grave more appropriate recognition. The plaque was inscribed with these words: "The Committee of the Red Cross to Miss Edith Cavell, victim of her patriotic devotion." I will say more about this plaque later. The following year, on 17th of March 1919, Edith Cavell's body was exhumed and the beginning of her quite extraordinary journey back here to Norwich. This was only months away from the end of a bloody, vicious conflict. Many, if not most, families and countries affected by the war were mourning the loss of relatives and friends. Edith's journey home offered an opportunity for thousands and thousands of folk to pay silent homage to her, as well as to their own. On the 13th of May 1919, Edith Cavell's coffin was carried on a gun carriage through Brussels to the North Station, attended by thousands who came to salute her and bid her farewell. The procession was escorted by nurses, including several from the First Aid Nurses Yeomanry, and British soldiers sent from Cologne at the initiative of Major B.L. Montgomery, later Field Marshal Montgomery of Alamein. A silver plate had been placed on her coffin with the words, "Edith Cavell, born December 4, 1865, died October 12, 1915. At the North Station, as we've heard, Reverend Sterling Gahan held a service before she was carried by train to Ostend on the Belgian coast. Edith's sisters, Lillian and Florence, travelled with her. Ostend came to a standstill as the citizens of that city paid homage. A street there was later named in her honour. The following day, the 14th of May, the coffin was laid on the afterdeck of the Royal Navy destroyer HMS Rowena to sail across the Channel to Dover under full naval honours, with the white ensign, as you will see, lowered to half-mast, a gesture reserved for the death of a member of the royal family and distinguished individuals. The arrival in Dover was attended by large silent crowds as Edith's coffin was carried in a funeral procession to the Marine Station, again escorted by nurses and Royal Navy personnel. At the Marine Station, the coffin was placed in a specially constructed funeral coach, now known as the Cavell van, and guarded overnight by a party of Connaught Rangers. She had helped at least 6 Connaught Rangers escape back to the UK in April 1915. At Dover, the St Mary's Society of Change Ringers rang a peal that lasted 3 hours and 3 minutes, with the church bells deeply muffled, usually reserved for royalty. And this plaque hangs in the church today. The next morning, the 15th of May, the Cavell van was attached to a scheduled train from Dover to London, stopping only at Folkestone and Ashford. The men and women working in the farms raised their hats and bowed their heads to honour her, and school children were aligned on station platforms like those here in Tyneham in Kent. The train arrived at Victoria Station at 11 o'clock. The procession through London to Westminster Abbey was again escorted by nurses and 100 soldiers. London came to a standstill as thousands lined the streets to pay homage. The following day, the New York Times wrote, and I quote, "No triumphant warrior and no potentate could have received a more impressive tribute than was paid today to the mortal remains of Miss Edith Cavell as they were borne through London." The memorial service in a crowded Westminster Abbey was conducted in the presence of royalty and senior politicians. The coffin was then transported here to Norwich, to her final resting place in Life's Garden, in this magnificent cathedral. The Cavell family had been offered a burial in Westminster Abbey, an invitation that was declined, preferring Norwich. When a young Edith Cavell was a governess to the Francois family in Brussels, the children all maintained notebooks with multiple questions that adults were asked to answer. Question number 20 in young Margaret's book, which I have here, was, "What is your ambition?" To which Edith Cavell responded, "To receive interment in Westminster Abbey." The date was 17th February 1894. And this is a copy from the page of the book. And question 20 is at the bottom of the left-hand column, "Receive interment in Westminster Abbey." Now, a few years ago, the next Archbishop of Canterbury was in Brussels. And I was asked to meet her to tell the tale of Edith Cavell and the work we were doing. When I produced this book and showed her that page, she immediately pulled her iPhone out from her religious robes and took a photograph. And this was the thing she really took away from our meeting. I hope she's still got it. May 2019 marked the centenary of Edith's homecoming. A religious service was held at the Anglican Pro-Cathedral in Brussels and the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul in Ostend. In Dover, St. Mary's Church rang the same peal as in 1919, again lasting 3 hours and 3 minutes. Interesting, one of the 2019 bell ringers is related to one of those from 100 years ago. These were followed by a memorial service in Westminster Abbey dedicated to Edith Cavell and Florence Nightingale. And finally, a special service here in Norwich Cathedral. Now, earlier, I mentioned the plaque at the graveside. The few belongings that Edith Cavell possessed, including this plaque, were taken back to the UK, and some ending up in the Imperial War Museum. Strangely, the plaque disappeared until 3 years ago. Richard Kent, unknown to me, lives near Birmingham and is a great-grandson of Edith's sister, Lillian, who had accompanied the coffin in 1919. Richard contacted me with this message, and I quote, "I thought that the 12th of October would be an auspicious day to contact you about a remarkable discovery I have recently made. in my mum's garage, I came across an old red trunk with all sorts of random things in it, among which was a plastic bag containing 3 broken pieces of the old marble plaque that was placed on Edith Cavell's grave in 1918. Comparing it with photos of Edith's graves in 1918 show that it is undoubtedly the same plaque. The plaque is now well restored and is the subject of a memorial at the entrance of the Schaerbeek Cemetery in Brussels. And this latest memorial was unveiled just 2 years ago. And this is the... Despite the Cavell family's request that no monuments be created in Edith's name, more were raised to her than any other woman caught up in the First World War. In Brussels, a memorial in her honour was erected after the war, but was destroyed by the occupier during the Second World War. Also in Brussels, a hospital carries her name, as does a street and tram stop. The neighbouring tram stop is Winston Churchill. In 2015, a new bust was unveiled by Princess Anne and Belgium's Princess Astrid. As we've seen earlier, there is this, in London, in the UK, there's a statue outside the National Portrait Gallery, unveiled by Queen Alexandra in 1920, and of course there is a statue here outside the cathedral. The War Memorial in Inverness is in Cavell Gardens, and a new plaque was unveiled there in 2015. In France, an Edith Cavell Memorial was erected in 1920 in Paris's Tuileries Gardens near the Louvre. This was also removed by the occupier during the Second World War. No fewer than 11 towns in France have places named in her memory. In Paris's 15th district, a temporary hospital was built in 1916 to treat wounded soldiers. Marie Curie worked there and insisted that it be named after Edith Cavell. Edith Piaf was born 2 months after Edith Cavell's death and is named after her. In Canada, there is Mount Edith Cavell in Alberta's Jasper's National Park. There are places named after her in at least 10 other countries. And on the planet Venus, the Cavell Corona is a geological feature. A Belgo-British historian, Hugh Boudin, compiled an Edith Cavell biography, a copy of which is held in the Imperial War Museum. There are more than 600 items covering books, articles, films, and plays. And of course, there will be one more book to be added when Candice publishes her book next year. Perhaps the most unusual book is a 174-page poem composed by Rajit Jubo, offering his account of Edith Cavell's story. 174 pages of a poem. On the 27th of May 2015, the then French President François Hollande, in his commemoration speech at the Panthéon, honouring 4 French resistance workers, included these words. Ils étaient admirables sans avoir voulu être admirés, reconnus sans avoir cherché à être connus, célébrés sans avoir imaginé être célèbres. They were admirable without wanting to be admired, recognized without seeking recognition, celebrated without imagining being celebrities. These simple words can surely be attributed to Edith Cavell and the many others who surrounded her in 1914 and 1918. Finally, I would like to close with a thought for the ancient Egyptian belief that we die twice. The first is when the physical body dies, and the second happens when the name is no longer spoken or remembered. Edith Cavell will surely live forever. Thank you.
We have a bit of time, so if you have any questions for Andrew, here's an opportunity. Nick?
Andrew, answer number 25. We know the answer, we don't know the question itself. Interestingly though, a list of questions of 1 to 25.
Yes, they're in the book.
They're in the book?
Yeah, in the book.
Right. This is going to give us, ladies and gentlemen, a completely new understanding of Edith. She is replying. Sorry, she is replying to those questions, and now we will know what the questions were. So this is going to be really interesting to find out. Can you give us an example or two?
The question?
Yeah, any of those questions.
Well, the strange thing is, I think Edith answered them very much with her tongue in cheek, because each answer starts with the letter R. For example, the first question is, what is your favourite flower? Well, it's the rose. What is your favourite bird? It is the robin. And they all begin with an R. But nonetheless, question 20, she said, receive interment in Westminster Abbey.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes. So our next and final speaker probably needs introduction to most of you. Nick Miller has been carrying the Edith torch for many years. I don't know exactly how long, but for many years. He has compiled the Edith Cavell Archive in Swardeston and has just been the greatest enthusiast and promoter and encourager of Edith studies that can possibly be imagined. And so it's very appropriate that he should be the final speaker to this afternoon symposium, as he shares with us, brings us up to date with the events of the archive and its plans for the future. So Nick, thank you. So to change, you press number 2.
Got it, yeah. Thank you very much. Super. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Are you still awake? Yes? Do you want to shake? I mean, stand up and shake, or would you like to ask a question that you didn't want to ask in public of the person next to you while I get set up? Okay? Because otherwise, you've had it all coming at you and virtually no participation. And that, in teaching terms, is absolutely disaster. However, I'm sure Edith wouldn't have approved of that at all. She'd really want everybody to be participating, asking questions, being contentious, okay? So you're welcome to be contentious at the end, all right? So thank you for coming. I mean, it's really great to have this number of people here. And there are more people, I think, watching this live on video. And if you want to see it, it's on YouTube. If you didn't catch something or whatever, that's the way to do it. The link is on the Cathedral website. I'm talking about new evidence and new insights. It didn't go on the slide, but in the last 10 years, what is the new evidence we've got? What new insights have we got? And what work remains to be done? Okay? I love the idea from Andrew that memory has to go on, and Peter has been absolutely superb in keeping the memory alive, as is Andrew Braddock, the Dean, and I'm sure you're all party to that, and great, so let's keep going together. So, let's go. I will go at a pace, all right? Otherwise we'll never keep to time. So where did it all start with this feeble human being deciding to get involved with Edith Cavell? Well, it started here, behind me. This is the east window at Swardeston Church. Has anybody seen that? Yeah, one or two people? Only one or two people. You've got to visit Swardeston, okay? You really have, because this was put up by the parishioners in 1917 in recognition of the famous daughter of the village. And as you can see, traditional Jesus in the middle on the cross, Mary and John, and at Jesus' feet, Edith. Red cross there on her armband, nursing gear, and quietly sitting there, and the book on her left reads, "Abide with me." Every time I get worship in that church, which is most Sundays, that hits me afresh. And she is a living example to me through that window. Just by the by, on the right is one of her many paintings, and she's very accomplished. Do look at the exhibition before you go, if you can, in the library, because there's several paintings and drawings by her there, and there's all sorts of stuff on my website, which we'll come to in a minute, where you can see how skilled she was as an artist. So that's the background. I arrived and found that there was talk about Edith in the church. There were pictures of her, and Canon Philip McFadden, who sadly can't be here today, wrote a very good little booklet and collected and looked after what the church had been given of Edith's work. The Reverend David Chamberlain, also still in Norfolk, did fantastic work setting up the website, which I still use to this very day, unchanged from his work 23 years ago. So look at that. Swardeston parishioners have been a great help. We got some money from the Heritage Lottery Fund, must be recognised. Our archive has been really, the majority of the work has been done by a lovely guy called Sam Bellotti. Well done him. Canon Peter and Gudrun Warren, who, is she in the audience? No, she's probably in the library right now looking after it, but she have been hugely helpful to me here. All the speakers today I have great admiration for and thoroughly commend to you, especially Andrew, and the many who write in to inquiry at Edith Cavell, not knowing that I'm sitting behind it. I like to keep anonymous. So, as an archivist, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's quite fun. What have you been doing all these years? Well, I've become a humble historian of World War I, nothing on the scale of Emmanuel, but still quite widely read. An amateur analyst of alt history. If you know about alt history, it's murder. It really is, but that's what I've learnt to do, and to say, do I believe it? How do we actually challenge? And crucially, very basic legal learning that I have is that we have to, as people of integrity, as Edith would have been, and certainly for me as a Christian, we have to be prepared to ask the awkward question. And some of these alt historians are doing that, but some of them are coming to very extreme results on the basis of very little evidence. They're making up a whole web of new ideas and blaming people for things when really there's very little evidence for it. Along the way, I got enthusiastic and I became an opera reconstructor and translator, a web searcher, an event planner, a provenance tracer for art. Do people know Fake or Fortune? Yeah, the television program? I'm now a provenance tracer for Edith's art and a speaker, yeah. So the archive was funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund in 2018. Basically, I applied, I said, I've got a lot of stuff here that's been given to me down the generations. What can I do with it? Can you give me some money? A, to create an archive, B, to do various things of making it known. So, for instance, if you go to the library, there are copies of this, which is Heritage Lottery Fund money. So if you pay the lottery, this is your money. And in there are 35 pages, A3, of pictures and story of all the things you've been hearing about from all the speakers today. And that's quite a useful resource. We don't publish it as such because there are too many copyright things to deal with, just impossible. We've got everything in a fireproof cabinet. My house is not yet burnt down, but it's there, just in case. We have an ever-expanding bookshelf, endless newspaper and journal articles, which you'll hear a bit about today, and the memorabilia of different bits and pieces, and some of those you'll see in the exhibition, which will be here till late December. Please don't miss it and encourage others to come and see it. Gudrun's done a great job. New items are coming to light all the time, and you'll see more of that in a minute. So, we said new evidence, new insights. So what is new over the last 10 years? First of all, projects and products. Secondly, new elements in the story. Thirdly, new artifacts discovered in the last decade. 14 examples in outline. We'll have to rattle through them. Fourthly, continuing controversies around Edith. We can't get away from it that people are making out things were quite different from some of the authoritative stuff we've just had from Emmanuel. And the road ahead, something new. We keep planning new ideas. And at the end, we can have some questions and discussions if you're still late awake and you don't want to go home. So quickly, going through the new products and things. We have a new gravestone and a new setting at Norwich Cathedral in 2016. And as Andrew just said, the grave marker from the Tir National near Brussels was rediscovered. That is the one you've just seen in his talk. We put an interpretation board alongside the statue outside here, fundamentally because people pass by and they say, who's up there? What was she remembered for? Honestly, they do that all the time. Now, one of my dreams is to do exactly the same. Where? Any volunteers? Where would I really like to see an interpretation board? Charing Cross or whatever. Yeah, St Martin's Place actually is technically the place. You've got to have something there. She stands 40 foot above contradiction and it just says, Edith Cavell, patriotism is not enough. You what? You know, we really need to. Come on, we own this woman. She inspires us. We've just got to get around to doing that. Westminster City Council, English heritage, have got to be persuaded. For whatever they may say, it's all, you know, but it's terribly important that it should be left in its original format. Rubbish. It should be explained to the people who pass by. 1919, we did a huge amount of work on the homecoming. Andrew's done the Belgian end of it. Here it is on the website. It's all there if you want to read it. The story of Jack, Edith Cavell's dog, the war hero, number at the bottom there. That is, the dog is in the exhibition. Don't miss Jack the dog. Swardeston and Norwich walks. Peter started this in 2015 with the English Edith Cavell pilgrimage on the right. On mine, you're right too. I thought, well, for the Heritage Lottery Fund, I'll do one for just within Swardeston. So if you come to Swardeston, at the back of the church, you should find an A3 map. You walk it round, it takes about half an hour, and you get all the stuff about all the background of her living in the village. And then we did some work. I did some work on remembering Edith Cavell amid COVID, just really reflecting what COVID was telling us and what Cavell went through and how there are parallels, and encouraging people to handle the fear, the anxiety, and all the uncertainty. And then finally, 6 encounters with Edith Cavell. Canon Doll came last year to Swardeston and gave us some of his talk today on Edith's Christian formation. But I did the other work on these other people and told their stories. Basically, I believe that the story is the way to people's hearts. You tell a story, a real story, and out of that they can start saying, do you know, that actually relates to my life. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about Nurse Margaret Pickering in a minute. Right now, actually. So what are the new elements in the story? Now, this is the most important one, as far as I'm concerned, of what has come up in the last 10 years. We've got lots of stuff that has been written. Diana Suhami's excellent book encapsulates it all in 2010. This was never heard of. My email address pinged one day, and this lady said, I'm writing from Australia, I've been researching my family, and I've got a bit of information that you might like to know. I looked in my book, and I said, Nurse Margaret Pickering, Cavell, all the Cavell biographies? No, never heard of her. Here she is. Born in Wrexham, 1878, father a Baptist minister. Lived in Wales till she was 23. 1901 enrolled as a trainee at Great Alderman Street Hospital in London. Nursed in England and Wales, came to Edith Cavell's nursing school in 1910. No known portrait of this woman. No evidence of how she got into Edith's care and a team, but what we do know, in 1913, whoops, 3 years later, she's pregnant. Single woman, pregnant, Brussels, nursing, Edith surrounded by lots and lots of young women who are looking, what are the rules? If the rule basically was, get pregnant, you're out. Get married, you're out. This woman was in real jeopardy. So late on in the pregnancy, it appears, she makes it known to Edith. And so read it on the website, the whole of this. I can't possibly encapsulate it in all. But anyway, Edith and she must have sat down, and Edith said, okay, let's see what we can do. She didn't say out. She could have said that. That is law. She actually, for me, is grace. She says, I understand your predicament. I'm single. I have a father who will take a very dim view of this. I have this, I have that. We're in this together. Can I help? She found the man who was responsible, and he agreed to pay something towards the costs of the child thereafter, every week. So did she. She then said, what about actually having this baby? And she said, can I help? Because the woman said, I don't know anybody in Belgium that can help me with this. And anyway, it's going to be really embarrassing if I have to use the local hospitals because I'm known there. Edith said, I've got an answer. Wrote to the Salvation Army in London, where she'd worked in the East End. Let's do something for this woman. I can guarantee an income. I can guarantee the fees. Just tell me, can you help her? Answer went back, yes. Actually, it was never needed. We don't know why. But Margaret Pickering came back to work for Edith. Against all the rules, Edith broke the law and gave grace to this woman in this predicament. Now, this, for me, is the essence of this woman. She is just so much alert to human conditions, so much loved by Jesus herself, and feels that's what she wants to do, to offer to this Baptist, yes, he was a Baptist. Her father was a Baptist minister. And so she did that. And Margaret kept on working there silently under the radar till after Edith's death and was eventually helped out of Brussels. That's a really important bit of new news. I can't get through all these like this, but Ada Cole was doing exactly the same as Edith was doing in Brussels. She was a Norfolk nurse, and she was up in Antwerp with her sister in a convent, and she was helping men across the border there. Fascinating discovery. Christmas 1885 in the Cavell home. We hear of Edith providing a Christmas party for needy children in Brussels in 1914. She'd had part of the family thing in 1885 in the Cavell home here in Norwich, in Swardeston. So the next new element of the story is actually quite difficult for me because I only just came across it about 2 months ago. Women in Intelligence, a definitive story of all the women who worked in intelligence from a British angle in both World Wars, by Helen Fry. And in there, her first chapter is Edith. And her very first chapter, in 11 pages, she takes no notice of any of the resources that are available to her. And she goes just to the Foreign Office files, which are really scrappy and rubbish, but well after the dates of Edith, and basically comes to the very firm conclusion: Edith was a spy, she was a spy master, and she led the whole of the network that we were hearing for the detail of from Emmanuel so well. She talked to Emmanuel, she didn't listen to Emmanuel, and she plonked that right up in the front of this book. So we are going to engage her with some serious historical reanalysis of her data. Watch this space. I like this sort of thing. Seriously, any historians here, welcome to talk to me afterwards, because I need more historical support on this. Grace Jemmett and Paulette Randall, you know about them? Yep. Edith's two sort of wards, in a sense, in Brussels. We found the end of their stories simply by looking in the British National Newspaper Archive and looking for those names. And that's very exciting. Again, all on the website. And finally, the other book. This is a much happier book. This is about the Fannies. Anybody know about the Fannies? First Aid Nursing Yeomanry. Brilliant book, fascinating stuff about these crazy English women who said, we're going to do something for our lads. We're going to get a car, we're going to stick an ambulance body on the back of it, we're going to take it across the channel, we're going to get nurses together, we're going to go and help the lads who have been injured, and we're going to learn motor mechanics and all sorts of good things. Great people. And Andrew was saying that Edith was taken through the station in Gare du Nord in Brussels. 10 Fannies, nurses, held that coffin, taking it onto the train. New elements. Artifacts. Okay, this is a terrifying list. These are they. A 3-act opera, dormant from 1927 to, whenever I said 2017, okay, all those years. I asked in the Norfolk Record Office of the catalogue, do they have any trace of any mention of this opera, because a student was looking for it. And lo and behold, Acts 1 and 2, in the composer's manuscript, sitting there. There's the manuscript, first page, there's the composer, and there's the opera house it was performed in. We revived it, 2023, in Malta. On the website, you can listen to it, parts of it. We're going to do it some more in the years to come. Cavell family piano. Man rings up from North Norfolk. I've got the Cavell family piano in this garage. It's going on the tip unless you want it. Oh, what a surprise. Then got a concert together, played the music that's sitting in front of that picture, not on that piano, but on a grand piano. The music teacher who was running the concert said, that is way above grade 8. She's a very, very accomplished pianist, if she can manage that. Edith Cavell's tea dress. You can see this, guys. Don't have to see a picture of it. It's in the exhibition. Go and have a look at it. Kindly lent by one of the members of the family. She wore it as a governess. She was 5'3". 4 photos of what Andrew had shown. 4 photos came my way in 2019 from a lady who'd found my website. Said, my relative took these photos on the day Edith was going through Westminster, and here she is. Trench lighters. You never heard of them. I can't go onto it, but it's basically a way of getting around the fact that matches got damp in the trenches and couldn't light a cigarette. So they made trench lighters. And I didn't know anything about this. A man wrote to me from South Dakota, been digging in the farmyard here, in among the mud. We found this extraordinary thing, the one at the bottom. Can you see United States flag on the one side, Edith Cavell's image on the front? What is it? Well, it is a lighter. The one at the top gives you a better idea. You strike a match, you strike the flint, and the thing is actually then taking up lighter fuel from inside the body of the little thing which is sitting in your pocket. Another one came to my attention only 5 days ago. Amazing. The letter to her mother, 26th of July. See it in the exhibition, read it online, all the background. There are some very poignant things. I haven't got time to talk about it, but it really is poignant, some of the things that Edith's saying. the very last line. This is the last thing her mother ever heard from her. There was one more letter that was written, but the Germans destroyed it. She wrote it on the night that she talked to Gaon in her cell. My dearest love to you and to all the family. I'm looking forward to a happy meeting later on. That was written 8 days before she was arrested. A painting. Somebody just sent me this, literally, just sent it. Bought this years and years ago in a Sheringham antique shop. It has EC in the bottom right-hand corner. Do you think it might be to do with Edith Cavell? Clearly Edith Cavell, hence my provenance hunting. And this is the house that she was painting in Rickmansworth when she was walking from the hospital that she was working at the time up to her friend's house in Rickmansworth. You know, this is in the last 10 years, guys, just suddenly arriving on my doorstep. Next, outside, you've seen the big statue in St. Martin's Place. Inside there is the National Portrait Gallery, complete rework in 2023. Look at this World War I gallery. Who is central to the World War I gallery? Do you know that little white figure? It's the woman who's 40 feet up on the statue outside. It's the maquette, as it's called, of that particular statue. She's got all the British top brass on the right-hand side and all the British politicians on the left-hand side. And who has the gallery put right in the middle of that as a kind of linchpin between the force of the army and the force of politics? It's the force of a quiet Norwich nurse. That is just brilliant curation in my view. Then, a dear friend, Jeremy Gaskell, who'd been in touch for years and years and years on the memorabilia side, he died, and we bought, with the cathedral money and the archive money, we bought 200 items of stuff that he collected from all around the world. Here's some lurid postcards from Italy, and here's some more well-known postcards. We have got acres of rich stuff there. These things happen. A guy writes to me from Boban, up in Durham, and he says, we've got a banner up here with Edith Cavell on it. It's a miners' gala banner. We march behind it every single year. There she is. She's remembered up there as a heroine. In Brussels, in the cathedral, last year, Kathy Howie, a local sculptress, has produced a new bust of Edith. Now she's not very pleased with it. She'd love to do it again if anybody had some money to help her fund it. But I think there's a looking outwards, and there's a kind of the constraints of occupied Belgium. Kathy lived in one of those 4 houses in the Rue de la Culture. And finally, again, only a month ago, someone writes from All Saints Church in Cambridge, which is now sadly deconsecrated. It's a beautiful William Morris-type church with fantastic Victorian stuff all over it. But a late addition in 1944 was a thing called the womanhood window. And there in the window, it's not the east window, but it's a side window, there are 4 really super women, one of whom, bottom right-hand corner, is Edith. Looking very young, it must be said. But isn't that lovely that they honour, in 1944, somebody can honour Edith all those years later, alongside Elizabeth Fry up the top left-hand corner, and I can't think who the other one was, but read it all on the website. Sorry, I could say that all day. Controversies. We've said this book, and Stella Rimington have just recently died from MI5, did a programme in 2015 on the BBC for half an hour, both of which say absolutely uncontrovertibly, they say, definitely a spy. Well, we don't think so, but we'll deal with it. Was she the leader of the network? No. What was her part in it? Well, I think you have the answer there from Emmanuel, who's researched it properly. Why was there a lack of effective intervention by the US and the UK in her trial? Was it purposeful? because they knew that she knew too much about something. That's what a lot of people are, the alt history stuff is coming into place. And the Belgian Relief Fund, I'm longing to talk to Emmanuel about, because lots of money was raised in England and the States, and sent to Belgium to care for the Belgian people under all the business, just like we'd been doing for Gaza. And there are, McGregor and Doherty in 2017 have written a huge book, massive amount of research, it's 550 pages, really saying that the whole thing was a cover for money to go from those places into the German army to feed them, and into the German population to feed them, so they could prolong the war so that bankers, naughty people at the top of the political establishment, could actually keep the war going because they were all making lots of money of it. Thank you very much. You know, the usual Jews and Masons and everybody else is kind of implicated. It's just impossible stuff. I mean, you could spend your whole life answering some of those questions. So, where are we going? Just, am I in time? That's still all right? Yes? 5 minutes? Good. Mid-26, we hope to transfer the Swardeston archive and the website to the Cathedral Library, which is such a joy to me. We're going to have to move. I can't be in Swardeston any longer for various reasons, and I want to leave it there. If somebody would take it up, nobody would. But I talked to Peter, I talked to Gudrun, and the answer was, yes, absolutely, we'll take it. And we're longing to take more, interest in it and get it more accessible. So, good news. If you had a few bob, I could do with somebody to help us translate the Excel spreadsheets on which the whole thing is based, which are on the web for you to use, into a rather more accessible format. I just don't know how to do it on the web myself. So if you know anybody who's good at that sort of thing and who would give us a hand, it's got to be dead easy for simpletons like us to run, but we'd love to do that. Secondly, I hope that we will do this before I finish. In Norwich, we have Norfolk Record Office, lots of stuff on Edith Cavell. Norfolk Heritage Centre, acres of stuff on Edith Cavell. We have the Castle Museum, some stuff on Edith Cavell. We have the library here with some stuff on Edith Cavell. We've got my archive. I'd just love to put the whole lot in one big pot. So you go to one place, and then we can all look, whenever you look at it, you can say, well, there's a copy there, there's a copy there, there's a copy there. Oh, that's the only copy in the whole of Norwich. Okay? So we need some money for that. Candice's book, 2027, I'm told. Keep at it, Candice. We're there for you, girl. Dream 1, St. Martin's Place, interpretation board, or a QR code. Do you know what a QR code is? A thing about as big as that. Stick it on the side. Give people access to my website or anywhere else that will tell them the story and tell them the statue. I think we'll manage that. Vassallo's 1922 opera, heard about that. Only had one performance in Malta, where it was originally written and performed in 2023. Plans are to do it in Missouri in the States for various reasons, and then to do it here in Norwich, and then to do it in Brussels. But we need some money, please, somebody, because we have got to reduce the orchestration from 63 players to 30. Quite easy to do musically, but just takes a lot of time, and it'll cost. And then we probably need to put subtitles, surtitles, so that when you're listening to the very complicated Italian, beautiful translation by Nick Miller, is there up there in English. Dream 3, full-length feature film. Last full-length feature film, anybody got the answer? 1939, well done. Starring Anne and Eagle. Oh, well done, very good. Who's seen it? How many people have seen it? Yeah, it comes on from time to time. It's terribly starchy, and it's very, it's like this. It feels like this, the whole thing. It was really almost a propaganda coup because of the arrival of Hitler and everything else. We need a better film. Now, we think that there's a real mileage in doing that, and I was hoping we're going to coincide with the publication of Candice's book in the States. Sadly, I think the time is slipping by. We haven't got any bites, and we've been looking for a year with the best connections we can in Los Angeles to get some producers and directors. We've got the money, no problem there, got the money, 25 million. Nobody wants to do it at the moment. And Mr. Trump may be just screwing that up by saying, only American films made in America will be shown in America. Right. And finally, this mustn't go much further, but there's a big vicarage which you've seen pictures of today in Swardeston by the church, built by Father Cavell. Question: when that comes on the market, is there a case, I'm only asking, I'm not saying it is there a case for making it into a Cavell research centre plus very upmarket B&B, like the Château de Belligny, and so that people who really wanted to know about this story in the years to come have got a base, a functional, money-making base for it. We need million and a half. Dream on, guys, dream on. Anyway, that's it. Dreams need the whatever. So to close, why does all this matter? I'm going to shock with this one. Why does all this matter today and for the future? You know, aren't we talking in old ancient history now? Come on, we're in the 21st century and we're looking forward to the 22nd. Got enough problems, etc., etc. The reason I believe this really matters, Edith was really an important leader, and well done the nurses for keeping that really high up the agenda. She represents resistance. The résistante is what they call them in French. But she represents resistance, and in my view, we need more resistors for all sorts of things. We are being bulldozed by unprincipled people who are full of lots of prattle, but they actually don't know what they're talking about. And we are running headlong into, I think, really serious trouble as a society. And we need people who learn to resist and have a different vision that they can articulate and make happen in their world. And that's what Edith did. She's a model for living. I don't need to say any more about that. I mean, it's just so clear this afternoon. And a figure for hope. Look at that darkness she was in the middle of. She's a figure for hope. Patriotism is not enough. Yes, okay, it's good-ish, but it's not enough. If you get everything in the patriotism bag, you've had a real trouble. And then for me, as I started with that picture of her in that window, which I sit with every Sunday, as a Christian, she followed Jesus in love, in obedience, my duty, but in love to Jesus, not because it's my duty and that, grit the teeth. In love for the man who saved her, the man who put himself on that cross above her in that window. She lived out the new kingdom of God. Look, there's a man, a woman with real vision of something, a different world, something that works completely differently, where you give to other people, you take a graceful attitude to the Margaret Pickering dilemma. You love the people who come to you who are likely to end up with you having your... She lived out a new kingdom. No hatred, no bitterness. Love your enemies, he said. And she saw beyond the grim present to a sure new life. This is if you go away with one thing, get this. Gayan and she are standing at the door cell, the cell door. And he is about to leave her to her fate. She will spend the night alone. In the morning, they'll come for her 5 o'clock in the morning. She gets up, 6 o'clock in the morning, she's ready to go. They take her to the Tir National and she dies at 7. What does she say to him as he goes out of the door? She says, "We will meet again." It's in Gayan's notebook, which is in the exhibition. We will meet again. And he says yes, knowing perfectly well there's no way he's going to see her in the morning. They've debarred him from that. What does she mean and what does he mean? We will meet again. Yeah. Now, if you got that hard in your heart, it actually means something to you, you can walk out at 10 to 7 You can look at the soldiers in the eye, and somebody says at some point that it's not a very well-attested thing. This. She may have said to them, "You do your duty like I've done mine. I know where I'm going, and it's not the end of the world. Sing Abide With Me with that in mind the next time you sing it, and you will be blown away, as I am every single time I sing that song, hymn. Don't think of me as a heroine or martyr, simply as a Christian who tried to do her duty." What a woman! Lovely people, thank you for listening. Questions? I don't know.
Thank you, Nick, as always. Any questions about it? Yes.
What about putting an information board at the... Oh, sorry. What about putting an information board at the Edith Cavell, what was the School of Nursing, at the UEA? It's got nothing
Thank you.
there.
One of the joys of 2015 was unveiling a plaque to her on the wall. I don't know if you've seen that. But an information board there sounds a good idea. Why couldn't they do it? Yes, okay. Can somebody note that down? I haven't got a pencil with me. Great. Yes. Any other questions? Or, disagree with me. Come on. Nobody's disagreed with anything this afternoon. It's absolutely useless.
All right, the speakers are still here as well, so if you have any questions for any of our speakers, please take advantage.
Yeah, Robert.
So I was really interested in what you were saying about Helen Fry.
Yep.
You mentioned Stella Remington.
Yep.
I heard that documentary. It's called Secrets and Spies.
That's right,
Probably
correct.
Still on the BBC.
Still there.
And she was, I think, from what I remember, she was suggesting that there was further evidence that she knew about in Belgium.
Yeah.
And I just thought, at the end of that programme, I felt a real cop-out because she might have it, but none of us know. So it was just left hanging in the air. And for you to put that up again today, I just thought, oh, right, so Nick got that. He maybe thinks it's unresolved or...
It's left hanging, isn't it?
Yeah.
The big problem is that the whole spying arrangements of Britain, although Walsingham in Queen Elizabeth I's time spent time setting up a spy service, really at the beginning of the First World War there wasn't a spy service of anything. And if you read Helen Fry, it says quite clearly that that was a story. So there is no systematic evidence around, though Fry says, well, they're keeping it from us because it's spying. There's systematic evidence, they say. There's systematic evidence in Brussels. Emmanuel knows the Brussels archive inside out. Candice has studied it all. I've got it all. We've all read it. We're actually looking at it and saying there are one or two ambiguous statements, yes, but they don't amount to a systematic analysis that there is evidence that Edith herself was a spy. Okay, so listen carefully to what Edith said, Emmanuel said, because there is some evidence of some of those people passing information, which is part of a role of spying. Edith was far too busy and far too, I don't know, I mean, she just didn't have any time to go chasing around, trying to collect up evidence to send it back through people. But there you are, people want to make her a spy because it helps to sell this book, you know. Sorry, that's a wicked attribution, but I'm going to try to have a proper historian-like discussion with Helen in due course. We are. Any more? Andrew? If any of you want to go or have to go, please go. Don't worry about this. We'll carry on maybe a little while.
I'd just like to add something to this spy story. And Emmanuel knows this better than I do, but during the First World War, many people would witness what the trains were carrying and what the armaments the Germans were bringing and where the soldiers were going. And they would note, these people who lived over the railway lines,
yeah.
They would note in code form and little bits of paper, and these bits of paper had to get back to the UK. Now, it's true, some of the people who went through the so-called Cavell network may have carried
Yep.
these messages.
That's right.
because in the cafe next to the nursing school, there was a so-called box under one of the benches where these messages were left.
Could have been left,
and
yeah.
the people would pick them up. So, I mean, this was not Edith spying.
That's right. It's carriers of information. I mean, many of the men who went back to Britain or even to France may have carried some data. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Any more? One more here.
Did you know that in the 90s, I know it's a long time ago, there was a diocesan group called the Pilgrim Players, and with a grant for Arts for Everyone, we had a workshop with Sheila Upjohn, and wrote a play that was produced at the Puppet Theatre. Do you know about that one?
Oh, yeah, it's in the archive. All the papers are in the archive.
Oh, well, I've looked at the archive and I couldn't find it.
Online?
What page is it?
My archive?
Well, no, the archive in the library.
Oh, not in this library. This is in Swardeston.
You've got it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good,
and
thank
six
you.
other plays. And
Good.
all the critiques about them and all the rest of it. Yeah, we're full of plays and films and everything else. Thank you. Talk about it later. Good. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. Keep the flag flying for Edith. And if you've got any money, give me a yell. Inquiry at Edith Cavell, that would be very nice. If you want one of Terry's books as you go out, please take it with you, otherwise I've got to take them all home. Take it with you, read it, lend it to somebody else, and you've done your duty. If you can give us a small donation towards it, that would be nice. My booklet's there as well. Just see what you can do, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today. God bless you on your way. Very successful. Probably.